Hello, my name is Virelia, and I thought I was coming home to care for my mother. Instead, I walked into a scene I'll never forget. My mother bleeding on the kitchen floor, whispering, "Run," while my sister-in-law and her lover just smiled. They said she fell. They said I was imagining things. But what if the fall was staged? What if the signatures were forged? What if my own brother knew and said nothing? They erased me from the will. They planned her funeral before she ever passed. They called me dramatic for asking questions. Isn't that how it always starts? A daughter comes home too late. And the ones who stayed behind already decided who the victim was supposed to be. But what if it wasn't my mother? What if it was me? I had only been gone 2 weeks. That's what I kept telling myself as I drove through the thick Carolina morning fog. Just 2 weeks. The tires crunched over the loose gravel as I pulled into the driveway of the house I grew up in. My suitcase was still in the trunk. I didn't plan to stay long. I just wanted to check in on Mom, maybe cook her breakfast, and sit with her for a while before getting back to work the following week. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the fog, or maybe it was the fact that every time I came home now, something about it felt less like home. I parked, grabbed my purse, and walked up the porch steps. The wind moved through the faded roses by the steps, petals scattered like confetti from a forgotten party. That's when I noticed the door. It wasn't shut, not wide open either, just ajar, enough to see the dim yellow hallway light flickering inside. I paused. The air felt too still for early morning. No birds, no hum of a neighbor's lawnmower, nothing. "Mom?" I called out as I stepped inside, my voice louder than I expected. "It's me." No answer. The smell hit me first, something metallic, sharp. I took one step, then another. The floor creaked beneath my shoes. The hall rug was bunched up like someone had tripped over it. My breath caught when I heard it, a sound like air escaping a balloon. Weak, wet. "Mom!" I dropped my purse and ran toward the kitchen. Glass crunched under my feet. My eyes adjusted, and then I saw her, collapsed beside the kitchen island, one hand gripping her side, the other smearing red across the tile. Blood. So much blood. Her blouse was soaked through. I dropped to my knees. "Mom, I'm here. What happened?" Her lips moved, barely. I leaned in. "Run," she whispered, her voice the thinnest thread of sound. "Run, now." That's when I saw them. Sabritha, my sister-in-law, standing in the doorway that led to the laundry room. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't even surprised. She was smiling, a slow, smug curve of her lips, like she'd been waiting for me. And next to her, Broxton, her handyman, though everyone in town knew he hadn't fixed a single damn thing in his life. He stood there with his arms crossed, like he owned the place, like he belonged there. "You're early," Sabritha said. Her tone was casual, not even annoyed, like I'd interrupted brunch. My stomach turned. I wanted to scream, wanted to lunge at her, but I didn't. Something in my mom's eyes stopped me. Fear, raw and urgent. This wasn't an accident, and this wasn't just about her. I moved slowly, pressing my hand over her wound. "It's okay, Mom. I'm here. I've got you," I said softly, even as my eyes stayed locked on Sabritha and Broxton. Then, quietly, I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my phone, slid my thumb over the screen. No sound, no bright light. I tapped the emergency call option and started a call to 911. The line connected. I didn't say a word. I set the phone beneath the edge of the dining table, mic facing out, and prayed someone on the other end was listening. Broxton stepped forward. "Looks like she took a little tumble," he said, voice flat. "Old people do that." I didn't respond. "Shame, really," Sabritha added, walking over to the kitchen counter like she belonged there. "We were just about to call someone. You beat us to it." My jaw tightened. I turned back to Mom. Her eyes fluttered open, then closed again. I pressed a kitchen towel against her wound, trying to slow the bleeding, my hands steady, even though my heart was pounding like a drum. "Why is she bleeding?" I asked, still crouched. "She fell," Sabritha said again. "Didn't she, Brox?" He nodded. "Hit the corner of the counter. You know how she gets." No, I said, standing now. I don't. The air between us shifted. Sabritha's smile faltered just for a moment. I kept talking. Anything to keep them from realizing the phone was recording every word. She needs an ambulance. Sabritha tilted her head. And how exactly are you planning to get one? You didn't make a call, did you? I shrugged. Maybe I did. Maybe you're on speaker right now. Her expression froze. Broxton moved toward the table. I stepped in front of him. Don't. He looked down at me, that usual arrogance in his eyes. I said don't. We stood like that for a beat, long enough for the air to thicken, for the adrenaline to coat every inch of my skin. Then, I heard it. Faint, distant. Sirens. Sabritha's head snapped toward the window. You called someone, didn't you? She didn't wait for an answer. Broxton stepped toward the table again. Don't touch that phone, I said firmly, louder this time. He paused. Or what? I swear, I said, eyes locked on his. If you take one more step, you'll regret it. Silence. Then the sirens grew louder. Closer. A car door slammed in the distance. I told you, I whispered to my mom, barely audible. Hold on. Help's coming. He was inches from finding my phone, and everything would unravel. Broxton's hand hovered just above the edge of the dining table. My heart threatened to leap from my chest, but I didn't move, didn't blink. He stared at the table like he could feel something was off, like the phone hidden beneath it was radiating heat. But then came the faint siren from outside, the kind that makes you look twice out a window without thinking. It distracted him, just long enough. He pulled back. Sabritha shifted her weight and stepped between me and my mother, her body language shifting from fake concern to quiet dominance. Your visit was never needed, Virelia, she said, her voice as smooth and brittle as old glass. She reached into the drawer nearest the fridge and pulled out a plain manila folder, one I hadn't seen before. I watched, my throat dry, as she opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You're just in time, she said sweetly, then smiled, and ripped the page clean in two. The sound was subtle, but something inside me cracked with it. I didn't ask what it was. I didn't have to. I knew. The way she held it, the way she smiled as she let the two halves flutter to the floor like dirty confetti. I recognized the signature, even in its torn form. My mother's handwriting, curled and careful. You think being a daughter gives you some kind of special power? She said as she stepped toward me. You were gone, Virelia. You left this house behind. You left her behind. I took a breath. That doesn't give you the right to erase me. Her laugh was quiet, dry. Erase you. Sweetheart, you were never printed. Not on the deed, not on the insurance, not in her daily life. You were just the one who called once in a while and mailed holiday cards. She circled me like a woman choosing produce at a market. Slow, methodical, condescending. Broxton leaned against the wall behind her, arms crossed, lips twitching at the corners like he was enjoying the show. I've been here, every day, cleaning up her messes, walking her to the bathroom, calming her down when she thought the mailman was trying to steal her checkbook, she continued. You think you can just show up and demand control? I didn't answer. She stepped in close, lowering her voice. This house, this family, this legacy, it's not yours. It never was. Somewhere behind her, Mom made a faint sound, more breath than voice, but Sabritha didn't even glance her way. It was that moment, the way she didn't even look. That was when I realized the care she claimed to give wasn't care at all. It was performance, for neighbors, for paperwork, for herself. I stepped back, giving myself just enough space to breathe, but she wasn't done. You want to know the truth? She said, her eyes narrowing. You weren't here when things got hard. You weren't the one sitting through the screaming fits, the soiled sheets, the nonsense stories. You were too busy playing independent woman in Boston. That doesn't give you the right to— Oh, I've got all the rights, she snapped, her veneer cracking for just a second. I made sure of it. I glanced at the torn paper on the floor. Half of my mother's name still visible, half gone. Like me. My mind flashed back, 2 years ago. The last time I sat in the backyard with Mom, barefoot in the garden, her hand gently patting mine. We were planting rosemary. She leaned in close and whispered, "I'm proud of you. I just don't say it enough." At the time, I smiled, swallowed the lump in my throat, and changed the subject. I didn't realize it might be the last honest thing she'd say to me without someone else watching. I remembered the monthly checks I sent to help with bills, the holiday visits that got shorter each year as work pulled me further away, the guilt I'd carried quietly, like a necklace I couldn't take off. Now it felt like Sabritha had reached over and ripped that necklace away and spit on it. She moved closer again. "You're not a daughter," she said softly, venom dripping behind her smile. "You're a guest, passing through. This isn't your home." I felt Broxton's chuckle more than I heard it. His breath made the air heavier. They didn't look at me like I was family. They looked at me like I was an intruder, something to be managed. But I didn't respond, not yet. I stood there, still, silent, as their words danced around me like smoke. My mother stirred on the floor. I turned slightly to check on her, only for Sabritha to block my view again. "She's resting." "Let's not wake her." "Again," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I bent slightly, as if adjusting the towel I'd placed earlier. But really, I checked her breathing. It was shallow. Her lips had lost more color since I'd arrived. I didn't know how much time we had. My fingers rubbed the corner of the table leg. 1, 2, 3. I kept count. I didn't know why. Maybe to stay calm. Maybe to remind myself I was still in control of something. "You should probably get going soon," Broxton said, cracking his knuckles, "before things get messy." The clock on the wall ticked louder than it had any right to. Seconds passed like entire conversations. I glanced at the dining table. The phone was still there, still recording. I hoped. I stood up straight. "You think I'm afraid of you?" Sabritha tilted her head. "I think you're out of your depth." I nodded slowly. "You might be right." She blinked, confused for half a second, just enough for me to step around her and kneel next to Mom again. My hand found hers, still warm. I whispered, so only she could hear. "I'm not leaving." Broxton stepped forward again. "If you were smart," he said, lowering his voice to a growl, "you'd be gone by sunrise." I didn't flinch, not even a twitch. They thought they'd silenced me, but I hadn't even begun speaking. After Broxton's warning, I sat still for a long time. They eventually left the room, probably thinking they'd scared me quiet, but the truth was, I wasn't silent because of fear. I was silent because I was listening. Once the front door slammed and their footsteps faded down the hall, I waited 2 full minutes before moving. My body was stiff, my back ached from crouching too long, and the metallic smell of blood clung to my skin. I checked on Mom again. Her breathing was faint but steady. She was hanging on. For now. I carefully retrieved my phone from under the table. The call had disconnected at some point. I didn't know when or how much had been recorded, but I prayed it had captured something, anything. I pressed the screen, hoping the audio backup function had kicked in. Still holding the phone, I backed out of the room. I didn't want to leave her there, not even for a minute, but I also couldn't help her if I was next on their list. I made my way upstairs, every step creaking beneath my feet like a confession. My childhood bedroom hadn't changed much. Same beige carpet, same dent on the closet door where I once threw a shoe during a teenage tantrum. I sat on the bed, pulled off my shoes, and tucked my phone beneath the mattress, microphone side up. Lying down didn't help. My body was still, but my mind kept spinning. And then I remembered the message. 2 days before I flew out to see Mom, I received an anonymous email. I didn't think much of it at the time. It looked like spam. The subject line had no sender name, just 3 words. Check the insurance. The body of the message was worse. Sabritha did this before. She was caring for a neighbor, Mrs. Edna. Woman died mysteriously. Check the insurance policy. History repeats itself. At the time, I scoffed. People say awful things online. I assumed it was a sick prank. Maybe someone who didn't like her, or me. But now that Mom was bleeding on a kitchen floor, and Sabritha had torn up a legal document with my mother's signature like it meant nothing, now I couldn't ignore it. I pulled the email back up, reread it word for word. Edna. I remembered that name. She was a quiet older woman who lived 2 streets down, passed away last year. Peacefully, they said. No children, no relatives. Sabritha helped with the funeral arrangements, talked the whole town into donating to a memorial fund. I even gave $50. I sat up straighter, skin prickling. If this was true, if that email wasn't just noise, then this wasn't just about greed. This was a pattern, a cycle, a playbook. The fog outside had deepened. I could barely see the oak tree from my window. The world had narrowed into shadows and breath. At 5:12 a.m., I slid out of bed and crept toward Mom's room. I opened her door with care. The hinges whined, and I froze. No movement from the hallway. I stepped in, barefoot. The room smelled faintly of lavender and something sour beneath it, like wilted flowers left too long in water. Her nightstand had a single lamp. I turned it on, low. In the dim glow, I saw the mess, papers half-filed, a drawer left slightly open, pill bottles scattered on a tray. I started with the obvious. I opened drawers, shifted socks, flipped through notepads. Nothing. Then I noticed a stack of books on the lower shelf. Gardening manuals, old cookbooks. I lifted the top 2. Beneath them, a wooden box. Light, unassuming. I opened it. Inside were small items. A brooch, 2 rings, and folded napkins from restaurants I didn't recognize. Nothing useful. But then, I tapped the back of the drawer. Hollow. My fingers ran along the edge until I found the small dip in the wood grain, an imperfection I remembered from years ago. My father once joked it was where secrets slept. I pressed. The bottom popped loose. There it was. A small, leather-bound notebook. The kind people used before everyone kept everything on phones. It smelled of dust and lavender oil. I opened it with care, my fingers suddenly trembling. The first page was blank. Then the next. If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. I stopped breathing. I flipped again. Sabritha watches me sleep. I pretend not to notice. Broxton comes by even when Darvin's not home. She lets him in. He looks through my papers. I told her not to sign anything. She got mad. I think they want me gone. I read the entries 3 more times, unable to move. Each word felt like a blade, carefully pressed into place. She knew. My mother had known what was happening and tried to hide her fear behind politeness and hesitation. That journal wasn't just her thoughts. It was a warning. It was a breadcrumb trail for someone, me, to follow. I sat on the edge of her bed, notebook in hand, breathing shallowly. The memory of the garden bloomed in my mind, unexpected. 5 years ago, we were planting zinnias in the backyard. I'd flown in for a quick visit, tired and distracted from work. I barely picked up my phone. Mom handed me a small trowel and smiled like I'd just cured cancer. You work too hard, she said, patting down the soil. That brain of yours is too kind, too soft for family politics. I laughed it off then, told her not all families were dysfunctional. She only looked at me with those gentle, tired eyes. Not all, no, but some hide it better than others. I should have stayed longer that visit. I should have seen it coming. My fingers curled around the notebook. She gave me the tools. I hadn't recognized them until now. I flipped to the last entry, dated just 4 days ago. She's asking about changing the will again. I told her no. She said I was confused and that no one would believe me anyway. I swallowed hard. The rage bubbled, but I kept it in. This wasn't about anger, it was about action. I snapped a photo of the last page and attached it to a message. To R. Layton. Subject: urgent. Documentation. Ray, I found something. It's worse than I thought. Call me as soon as you get this. I hit send. Then I whispered into the quiet. Let's see what else you're hiding, Sabritha. And what I found next made me question if I had ever known my family at all. The message from Ray buzzed against the wood of the nightstand just after I had tucked the journal back beneath the mattress. I hadn't slept. There was no point. When fear curls up beside you in bed, sleep stops being an option. I checked the message. Call me. We need to act fast. But I didn't call. Not yet. The house was still quiet. Morning hadn't arrived in full, and outside the windows, the sky hung in that strange blue limbo. Neither night nor day, just the in-between. I left my room quietly, bare feet on cool hardwood. No sound from down the hall. I passed by my mother's door, pausing only to check that she was still breathing. She was barely. I needed to understand the scope of what I was dealing with. And there was only one room in this house that ever mattered when it came to truth. My father's study. He hadn't been gone long when Sabritha slowly started turning it into her home office, though I doubted she ever opened a single file. I stepped inside and shut the door softly behind me. Everything looked the same on the surface. The leather chair was untouched. The bookshelves still held volumes of outdated legal codes, aging encyclopedias, and dust jackets Mom never dared throw out. But in the corner, tucked beneath the tall filing cabinet, I found something that didn't belong. A slim, silver screwdriver. Too clean, too convenient. I used it to pop open the middle drawer. Locked. I braced myself, slid the flathead into the tiny opening, and twisted. It gave. The cabinet creaked open like something in a haunted movie. I knelt, heart pounding, and began flipping through dusty envelopes, old tax forms, utility bills from the 90s, expired DMV notices. Nothing important. Then I saw a manila folder with a crisp new label written in careful block letters. Final Affairs, Mariella. My breath caught. I pulled it out and opened it slowly. The first page was a life insurance policy, still fresh, barely creased. My mother's name printed at the top in bold letters, followed by the word deceased, pre-filled in one section. The policy listed one beneficiary, Sabritha R. Clark. No mention of Darwin. No mention of me. I flipped to the next page. The signature was there, but wrong. My mother's handwriting was fragile but graceful. What I saw on this page was shaky in all the wrong places, loops she never made, slants she'd never used. I'd seen her sign enough birthday cards and grocery checks to know this wasn't hers. And the date, only 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I was still in Boston, helping a nonprofit finalize elder protection legislation. Meanwhile, here in my hometown, my mother's life had already been priced and claimed. I sat back on the carpet, staring at the papers like they could catch fire on their own. I should have cried, screamed, but all I felt was a cold anger that curled around my spine and sat there like armor. I kept digging. Behind the insurance file was another packet, this one thicker. I slid it out and read the title page. Last Will and Testament, Mariella Ann Clark, revised. My stomach dropped. The notary seal was faint but legible. I recognized the name instantly, Greg Lambert. Broxton's old high school buddy, a man who once tried to sell me a custom hot tub out of a trailer and got mad when I said no. I flipped through the document. Everything sounded professional, legal. The language was standard. In gratitude to those who have cared for me daily, in recognition of unwavering support. But then came the part that made my throat tighten. There was no mention of me, not a single word, no clause for the youngest daughter, no line about shared memories or childhood photos or the holidays I sacrificed to visit. I didn't exist in this version of my mother's life. I closed the folder slowly. Outside the study window, the sun had finally started to rise. Soft gold light cut across the desk in uneven angles. I stood, took photos of every page, then carefully placed them back exactly how I found them. Sabritha was smart, conniving smart. If she suspected I'd seen anything, she'd double down fast. Later that day, she cooked dinner. Yes, cooked. Broxton was there too, acting like nothing had happened. He chewed loudly. She hummed softly while stirring sauce. "Smells good, doesn't it?" she asked. I didn't answer. She poured a glass of wine and sat across from me like we were old friends. "When your mother passes," she said between sips, "I'll handle the arrangements. You won't need to worry about a thing. You can grieve in your own time, elsewhere." I kept my eyes on my plate. She leaned forward slightly. I know this must be hard for you, but trust me, she's not the same woman you remember. These last 2 years, she's been different, confused, forgetful. You wouldn't know. You weren't here. I met her gaze. No, I wasn't. Her smirk deepened, like I'd confirmed some unspoken victory. After dinner, I waited until they both left the room. Broxton took out the trash. Sabritha pretended to get ready for bed. I returned to the study. This time I wasn't gentle. I opened the folders again, laid everything out, took photos, forwarded the images to Ray with a single sentence. She's planning a death. I don't know when, but she's prepping it. Then I printed copies, one for myself, one for the lawyer. One I planned to send to a family friend in the sheriff's department if things went sideways. Around midnight, I stood by Mom's bed. She was still unconscious, breathing thin but alive. I reached out and took her hand gently. They don't get to decide how this ends, I whispered. My phone buzzed. Ray's message lit up the screen. Call me. We need to act fast. But nothing could prepare me for what Darvin had already known and hidden. Ray's voice came through a video call just after sunrise, when the world outside still hadn't made up its mind whether it wanted to be warm or cold that day. I was in the kitchen, mug of black coffee untouched in front of me, while the glow of the laptop screen flickered off the pale yellow walls. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Virelia, he said, tone low, you need to know something before you move forward. I leaned in slightly, arms crossed, bracing. The notary on the revised will, Greg Lambert. He's not just Broxton's friend. He was referred by your brother. Darvin made the introduction. For a moment, everything went still in my chest. I blinked. You're sure? Confirmed, he said. Twice. From Greg himself, and a mutual contact. It was Darvin who told him, quote, we just need this signed. Don't ask too many questions. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. The wood felt splintered under my grip, like the truth I thought I had about my family. Ray added more gently, I'm not saying he knew everything, but at best, he turned a blind eye. That, at best, felt like a knife. After we ended the call, I sat there for another 10 minutes, staring at the spot on the wall where Mom used to tape up our kindergarten drawings. I remembered Darvin's scribbles, a crooked sun and a lopsided house. He always drew himself taller than me. Even back then, he had to make it clear where he stood. I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked to the back porch without a word. It was late afternoon by the time I texted him. Me. Can you come by the house? Just you. I need to talk. Darvin. What's this about? Me. The will. The insurance. Mom. He didn't reply right away, but 30 minutes later, his car pulled into the driveway. He stepped out, wearing a blazer over a t-shirt, like he always did when he wanted to look important without putting in too much effort. His face looked tired, or maybe I was just finally seeing him without the veil of sisterly loyalty. We sat on the porch. I didn't offer him anything to drink. He looked at the horizon. I looked at him. I found it, I said. The new will, the insurance policy, the forged signature, and Greg Lambert's notary stamp. Darvin didn't move. I continued. Ray confirmed you were the one who referred Greg. Still nothing. Finally, he sighed. I didn't know the details, Virelia. I knew Sabritha wanted to make some changes. She told me it was for practical reasons, that Mom didn't want to leave things messy for us. I shook my head. You knew enough. He rubbed his face, then looked down at his hands. Look, I didn't want to get involved. I've got my own life, my own family, a job that... Don't, I cut in. Don't make this about being busy. You saw what was happening and did nothing. He met my eyes then. I thought maybe you'd overreact. You've always had a temper when it comes to Sabritha. I laughed, short, bitter. So your solution was to let her rewrite Mom's life? He didn't answer. I knew something was off, he said finally. But I didn't want to deal with it. I have a career, Virelia. I can't get tangled in this kind of drama. There it was. The word drama. That's what they all called it when women like me refused to stay quiet. When we stood up and named things for what they were, fraud, manipulation, abuse, they called it drama to make it sound petty. I stood. If you don't stand up now, you'll be standing beside her in court, I said, voice steady, low. He looked stunned, like I'd slapped him. But I didn't wait for a response. I walked back inside, closed the door gently, and left him on the porch with whatever pieces of his integrity he had left. That night, I went back to the journal. I turned to the last page again. The handwriting was weaker, the letters shaky. If Virilia ever comes home, I can finally breathe again. My throat closed. I pressed the page flat and whispered, "Then breathe, Mom." We're not done yet. The next morning, just as I was stepping into the hallway with a fresh cup of coffee, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Miss Clark?" a woman asked. "Yes." "This is Janet with the billing department at Mountain View Hospital. I didn't want to alarm you, but we noticed something odd. Your mother appears to have a second life insurance policy on file. One she's never signed on her own, and it was only recently activated." My heart dropped. "A second policy?" "Yes, ma'am. We ran the name for billing alignment, and there are 2 active policies under her SSN. One lists a different contact, a Mr. Broxton Ellis." My blood went cold. "They forged more than her signature," I said. "They rewrote her life." And I was about to rewrite it back, with everything I had. Ray's message had lit a fire under me, but it wasn't panic. It was precision. By the time the hospital opened for morning visits, I was already dressed and parked across the street, sipping lukewarm gas station coffee while going over my plan. I'd tucked the leather journal into my tote bag, wrapped in a scarf. My mother's phone was charged, and I had one goal that morning: get the proof I needed before anyone realized how far I'd come. Inside her hospital room, the air felt cleaner than our house had in weeks. Machines hummed softly. A nurse had braided her gray hair neatly over one shoulder, and a blanket covered her up to her chest. For the first time in days, she looked peaceful. I pulled up a chair and took her phone out quietly. There was a faint fingerprint smudge on the lower screen. She'd always kept it nearby, even if she didn't answer half the time. Most of the apps were untouched, except for one folder marked Notes. I opened it, expecting grocery lists or medication reminders. What I found instead stopped me cold. Inside a subfolder labeled Audio Notes, there were 3 recordings. The first was only 12 seconds long. A scratchy voice, undoubtedly Sabritha's, said, "Once she signs, we don't need her around much longer. Let her go peacefully or whatever." The second was longer, almost a minute. In it, Broxton's voice was unmistakable. "Virilia's too far away. She won't be here in time. Just get it done and call me." I sat there frozen, listening to every syllable like I was hearing a confession in a courtroom. This wasn't just speculation anymore. This was premeditated. Cold. Strategic. It was all the proof I needed. I copied the files onto a flash drive I'd brought, just in case. The third audio was shorter again, but it made my stomach twist more than the others. "Sabritha. She's starting to ask questions. We need to do this soon. I don't care what Darvin says." Darvin. He wasn't just a passive bystander. He'd been involved far earlier than I'd thought. I closed the folder and placed the phone back on the nightstand as gently as I could. My mother stirred. I leaned in, brushing her hair from her cheek. Her eyelids fluttered open, and for the first time in days, her eyes locked onto mine with clarity. "Virilia?" she whispered. "I'm here, Mom," I said quietly, taking her hand. She swallowed hard, like words had been caught in her throat for too long. "I had to act like I didn't understand," she said, her voice raspy. "If I fought them, they would have done something sooner." "I know," I whispered, holding her hand tighter. "You were smart." She blinked slowly. "Did you find it?" I nodded. "Everything." She closed her eyes again, and a tear slipped out. "I hid it. For you." "You did the right thing," I said, kissing her forehead. Now it's my turn. That afternoon, I returned home while the sun was still high in the sky. The kitchen window was open, and I could hear Sabritha humming some upbeat tune while stacking dishes. While Broxton's truck wasn't in the driveway, thankfully, I placed 3 neatly printed files on the kitchen island: the forged will, the life insurance policy, a transcript of the audio files. On top, I left a note in thick black ink. Try again, and I won't just call my lawyer, I'll call the police. No dramatic confrontation, no raised voice, just ink on paper and silence. The next morning over coffee, Sabritha walked into the kitchen with a tight-lipped smile. She picked up the files, eyes darting line to line. Her face didn't change much, but I saw it in her hands. A tremble, small but real. "You're being dramatic," she said, setting the papers down a little too hard. I didn't respond. She stared at me for a long moment. "You always did need attention." Still, I said nothing. Eventually, she walked out of the kitchen and didn't come back for hours. That night, I got to work. I gathered every scrap of evidence I had: photos of the forged documents, copies of the journal pages, printed transcripts of the recordings. I placed them in a black binder labeled Clark Estate, Confidential. One copy went to Ray. The other, I hand-delivered to Judge Mary Lee, a longtime friend of Mom's who had retired early after losing her husband. She didn't say much when I handed it over, but her eyes said everything. "You'll have to be careful, Virelia," she finally said. "These people, they think no one can touch them." "I'm not here to touch them," I replied. "I'm here to stop them." It was nearing 10 when I returned to the house. The driveway was dim, the porch light flickering. I parked behind Broxton's truck and took a moment to collect myself before getting out. That's when he stepped out from the shadows, leaning against the shed like he'd been waiting. "You really ought to stop snooping, sweetheart," he said. I turned to face him, calm. "If you touch me," I said, "you'll wish you had a better lawyer." He chuckled low and stepped closer, but I didn't move. "I know what you're doing," he muttered, "but this'll blow up in your face." I walked right past him, didn't even brush his arm. "I've been through worse," I said over my shoulder. Inside the house, everything felt too still. I locked the door behind me and went to my room. Before I even had the chance to sit down, something slid under my door, a plain white envelope. I opened it. Inside was a photo of my car, parked outside the hospital, and a sticky note. "Nice to see you visiting. Let's hope it's not your last." My fingers tightened around the paper, but my resolve didn't budge. Now they were playing dirty, and I was ready for war. The envelope was still in my hand, the sticky note like poison on cheap paper. I didn't flinch. Not because I wasn't shaken, truth be told, my fingers had gone numb, but because I couldn't afford to blink first. They were counting on fear. They were counting on me shrinking. And I'd done enough of that for a lifetime. I snapped a photo of the note and the license plate visible in the corner of the surveillance picture and texted it to Ray. "Me. They're escalating, so will I." His reply was quick. "Ray. Good. I've already drafted the motion. Call me at 9. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by my window, the journal in one hand, my mother's phone in the other, and stared into the yard. A yard that used to hold birthday parties and 4th of July cookouts now felt like enemy territory. By the time the sun peeked over the trees, the sky was cloudless, calm. That strange, quiet calm that always comes before a storm. Around mid-morning, there was a soft knock at the back door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I slipped my phone into my pocket and answered it slowly, carefully. It was Eunice. Her short gray curls were neatly pinned, and she clutched her handbag like she wasn't sure she should be here at all. "May I come in, dear?" she asked. I nodded and let her in, guiding her to the breakfast nook where she used to sip lemonade with my mother in the summers. "I wasn't sure I should say anything," she started, "but I haven't been able to sleep." I waited. "I saw them, weeks ago, dragging your mama back inside. She was yelling. I thought maybe she was just having one of her episodes. You know how folks talk." She wrung her hands. But then I saw Broxton. He was holding her arm too tight. "And Sabritha," she said, "you keep that mouth shut, old woman. or next time it'll be worse. My blood turned to ice. Why didn't you tell anyone? I asked gently. Eunice's voice cracked. Because I was scared and ashamed. I thought I should mind my business, but now, with all these police calls and lawyers showing up, I think I was wrong. You weren't, I said. You're telling me now. That's what matters. I'll testify, she whispered. If it comes to that. I nodded, holding her hand. It's going to come to that. That night, Sabritha made dinner. Chicken casserole and cornbread, as if we were just another normal Southern family gathered for a weeknight meal. She moved with that same eerie grace, like nothing was unraveling around her. Broxton chewed loudly. Darvin hadn't been around in days. I sat at the far end of the table, arms folded, waiting. Sabritha sipped her wine and gave me a long look. You know, she said casually, some people don't realize when they've overstayed their usefulness. I smiled softly, met her eyes. Some people mistake silence for submission. The air stiffened. Even Broxton paused mid-bite. She set her fork down. You always were clever with words, just not very good at action. Maybe, I said, but lately I've found a taste for both. She pushed back from the table slightly, her smile now a razor blade. This house doesn't belong to you. Nothing here does. I leaned forward. Not yet. That shut her up. For now. Later, after the dishes were washed and the house was quiet, I stood brushing my teeth in the upstairs bathroom, lights off, just the glow of the hallway illuminating my reflection. I barely recognized the woman in the mirror, but I liked her better than the one who first came home. The soft knock on my bedroom door came just after midnight. I opened it to find Sabritha standing there, barefoot, arms crossed. You don't belong in this house, she said, voice low. The courts won't change that. And justice? It isn't made for people like you. You came too late. The game's already played. Broxton leaned on the doorframe behind her, arms folded. I looked between them and said nothing. Nothing to say? She asked. No, I replied. I'm saving it for the judge. They left, but not before Broxton let out a laugh and muttered, You're gonna love how this ends. I shut the door gently behind them. Then I got to work. I printed all the documents again, hard copies in case anything happened to the digital files, loaded the audio recordings to 3 flash drives. One I kept on me at all times. Another I placed inside my mother's old Bible. The third I handed to a former co-worker turned friend who lived 20 minutes away. I stared at my reflection one last time before bed. If they want war, I said aloud, they'll get law. I didn't sleep. And just before sunrise, as I was pouring coffee into a travel mug, a car screeched outside. I knew that engine, Broxton. Seconds later, a voice pierced the quiet morning. Get out here! I didn't rush. I placed my phone in recording mode again and calmly walked toward the front door. The war wasn't just on paper anymore. It had arrived on my doorstep. The porch lights were still flickering from Broxton's yelling fit the night before. I hadn't opened the door, not out of fear, but because I was done giving them any more stage time. I let the barking rage roll into the wind, and once his engine finally peeled away, I gathered what I needed. By 6:45 a.m., I was standing in front of the Buncombe County Courthouse, binder in hand. The metal edges of the case were cold through my fingers, but my grip didn't loosen. Inside was everything, every lie, every forged signature, every whisper they never thought I'd catch. This was no longer about proving a point. It was about ending a pattern. Ray was waiting just inside, suited and steady as always. You ready? He asked. Born for it, I said. By 7:05, I had signed the civil and criminal complaint. Elder abuse, fraud, coercion, attempted murder. My signature didn't shake. I didn't need to read it twice. I'd lived every line. We walked out. No press, no drama. I didn't need an audience. I needed results. Later that afternoon, the storm came. Sabritha received the subpoena on her own front porch. I wasn't there, but the neighbor across the street texted me. She turned white as a sheet, slammed the door so hard the wreath fell off. Broxton wasn't so lucky. He was picked up on site at a hardware store, mid-transaction. Apparently, He was buying locks, fitting, assault, insurance fraud, conspiracy. The arrest was clean, quick, but his mouth? Not so much. "I didn't hurt nobody," he reportedly yelled as they cuffed him. "This is all that girl's fault." That girl, not even a name, just that girl who refused to shut up and go away. Darvin didn't say a word. He showed up to the house mid-evening, alone, no tie, looking like the ghost of the man who used to pull me in a red wagon down the driveway. "You were warned," I said, voice quiet but flat. He didn't respond, didn't even sit down, just stood in the doorway like he wanted to step in, but knew he couldn't anymore. The trial began exactly 3 weeks later. The courtroom was packed. Local media had caught the story through court records. Elder abuse is something that cuts deep in communities like ours, where Sunday potlucks and porch visits still hold sacred value. It was no longer just my family's shame. It was the town's shame, too. I wore navy blue. No jewelry, no makeup. Just the binder in my lap and my mother's strength in my spine. Eunice took the stand first. She was nervous, hands trembling slightly as she clutched the railing, but her voice never cracked. "I saw them drag Mariella back into the house. She cried out. I didn't help her. And that's on me." The judge nodded. Quietly. The audio files came next. Ray played them slowly, each one louder than the last. Sabritha's voice. "Once she signs, we don't need her around much longer. Broxton. Virelia's too far away. She won't stop us." And finally, the one with Darvin's name. "She's starting to ask questions. I don't care what Darvin says. This has to happen." You could hear the breath in the courtroom stall after that last one. It was like every person suddenly realized this wasn't a soap opera. This was a true, calculated betrayal. Sabritha tried to cry. Makeup running, hands clutched together. Theatrics. The judge didn't flinch. Broxton stared at the floor the entire time. Darvin never looked at me. Finally, the judge asked if I had anything I wanted to say. I stood slowly, walked to the front, and turned to face the room. Not just the judge, not just the defense, but everyone. "I didn't come here for revenge," I began. "I came here for truth. I came here because my mother deserved peace in her final years, not manipulation and fear. I came here because I spent 2 decades building a life outside this town, and I thought that meant I could trust the ones who stayed to take care of the people we love." I paused, let the silence settle. "And I came here because someone had to believe me." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. But when I finished, the judge nodded once, slowly. Then came the verdict. Sabritha. 20 years. Fraud. Elder abuse. Attempted murder. Broxton. 18 years. Darvin. No jail time, but stripped of all financial control over Mom's estate. Fined. Required to issue a public apology. I didn't care about the theatrics. I didn't want handcuffs. I wanted accountability. And I got it. Outside the courthouse, Mom sat in her wheelchair, her eyes shielded by oversized sunglasses. I bent down beside her and took her hand. "We're going home, Mom," I whispered. "For real this time." She squeezed my fingers gently. That was enough. That evening, as I unpacked a few boxes in the sunroom, my phone buzzed. Voicemail. Blocked number. I played it. A male voice. I knew it instantly. "This isn't over, sis. You may have won now, but the family never forgets." My hand trembled for half a second. Then I pressed delete. Justice was served, but wounds don't heal just because the courtroom closes. After everything, the house felt foreign, not threatening, not painful, just emptied of its power. 3 days had passed since the verdict. I'd returned to collect a few final things. The movers were coming next week. I didn't plan on staying another night. The echo in the hallway as I opened the front door made that decision final. The sunlight streamed through the living room window, catching the dust in long golden beams. For a moment, it almost looked like peace. But peace wasn't something this house had offered easily. I made my way to the kitchen. The bloodstains that once coated the tile had long since been scrubbed away, but memory doesn't clean as easily. I stood there in silence, hands resting on the edge of the counter where I'd once tried to stop the bleeding. This was the room where things unraveled, where the truth had begun to shout louder than the lies. Mom wasn't here anymore. She had been relocated to a small care facility just outside of Asheville. Quiet, private, gentle. She chose it herself. She wanted a place with gardens, books, and staff who didn't talk down to her. I visited every day since the trial, not out of guilt, but because I wanted to. Because it was no longer about checking in, it was about showing up. As I walked through the house one last time, the family friend helping with the cleanup, Annette, a retired librarian with the eyes of a detective, called out from the living room. "You might want to see this." I followed her voice to the fireplace. She was crouched down, her hand resting on the edge of the brick hearth. One of the wooden panels had been pulled slightly away from the wall. "I bumped it while vacuuming," she said. Behind the panel, tucked in a plastic sleeve, was an envelope. My name was written on it. I slid my finger under the flap and unfolded the papers inside. The original will, notarized a year before any of the drama began. I read the first line aloud, just to hear it. "To the one who protects with heart, not proximity, my daughter, Virilia." Below that, in my mother's careful handwriting, "Family is not who's closest, it's who shows up when it matters." I swallowed hard, blinking fast. And this was never about being the favorite. It wasn't about inheritance or titles or paperwork. It was about love, action, truth. The next morning, I checked the mailbox at the new address and found a single envelope. The handwriting on the front was familiar. Darwin, no return address, no phone number inside. Just one page. A real letter, written by hand. "Virilia, I won't ask you to forgive me. I don't think I deserve it. I knew things were wrong, and I didn't stop them. I let my wife manipulate the truth because it was easier than confrontation. You were brave. I wasn't. I'll live with that. I hope Mom is okay. I hope someday we talk again, but I understand if we don't. Darwin." I sat with that letter for a long time, read it twice, cried the third time, but I never wrote back. Some doors don't need reopening. Some cracks need to stay cracks. Instead, I focused on the work ahead. 2 months later, I opened a small legal office in downtown Asheville. Nothing fancy, no marble floors or receptionists with headsets, just a front desk, 3 chairs, and a wall lined with books that actually got used. The name on the door? Mariella Advocacy. Our focus was elder protection, estate integrity, and family fraud prevention. My first client was a woman named Carla, who was worried her brother was pressuring their father into changing his medical directive. As she spoke, her hands trembled, her voice broke, and I listened, really listened. I knew that fear. Carla left with a plan and a folder of resources, and I sat in my chair after she left, knowing I'd built something worth keeping. A few weeks later, I was asked to speak at a local conference on elder law and rights. I almost declined. Public speaking was never my strength, and my story didn't feel like one I wanted to relive in front of a crowd. But then I remembered what I'd told Ray during the trial. Someone has to believe. So I stood on stage, in front of 60-something faces, and I spoke. "You don't have to scream to fight," I said. "You don't need to break to prove you're strong. Sometimes it takes more courage to stay, and speak when no one wants to hear." There was no roaring applause, just a quiet, collective inhale. Then one by one, people stood. It wasn't for flair, it was for truth. That night, I drove to the care home just before closing hours. The nurse nodded me in. Mom was sitting by the window, reading. She smiled when she saw me, eyes clearer than I'd seen in years. I walked over, kissed her cheek, and placed a single rose on the sill beside her. "You stayed, baby," she whispered. I sat beside her, took her hand in mine, and smiled. "I never left," I said, and I meant it. Sometimes, the people we trust most are the ones who quietly rearrange the truth behind closed doors. This story isn't just about revenge, it's about reclaiming your voice when the world calls you dramatic, about standing up even when your own family wants you silent. What would you do if your name was erased from your own legacy? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that speak louder than fiction.